My name is Daniel. My name is Daniel.
My name is Daniel.
My name is Tanya. At the age of 13, I entered the Yu family. My father had died when I was 5, leaving behind my grandmother, mother, sister and me with a buffalo and a small plot of land. We were grateful we had enough money to bury him.
My mother's brother told her to send my sister and me to our future husbands' families. Let them start eating from their husband's rice. They really belong to them after all. But my mother wept and would not let us go. They're all I had, even if they're only girls.
But even if my mother had consented to send me off as a child wife, I would not have gone. I would have cut off my braids and dressed as a boy and run far away. I had seen how the child wives in our village were treated by their husbands' families, like slaves, beaten and humiliated every day.
One day, I saw a child wife struggling with her mother-in-law on the mountainside near the lake. The girl's hands were tied together, and the woman was hauling her by the rope, beating her with a stick. The girl would not follow her home. Instead, she jumped into the lake, pulling her mother-in-law with her. I was 4 when this happened.
During the next 8 years, where I stayed with my mother and grandmother, I worked as if I were a boy. My sister, although 2 years older, was weak and had to stay home to cook and sew and look after the chickens. Her skin was fair and her hair always neatly combed. I looked after the buffalo, carried water and planted rice and vegetables with the grown-ups. I collected dung to make our soil rich and our plants grow well.
When I was a little older and stronger, my mother sent me to the mountains to cut firewood with the men. We had to climb up the mountains and the work was hard, even for the men. I could not chop down trees or big branches like the men did. And so I waited for them to be felled before I chopped off smaller branches with my father's axe.
When my mother needed money, I went with the men to sell firewood in a town across the mountains. Although I was only a girl who had no father and no brothers to protect her, the men treated me kindly. They let me step on their backs and shoulders to climb over rocks. When they could, they carried some of my firewood for me.
My mother wept when my husband's family sent for me when I was 13. She and my grandmother went to live with relatives. We gave our farm to them, for by then, even my mother was too weak to work anymore. My sister went to her husband's family.
After our wedding, my husband followed his uncle to Nambu to learn trading. I lived with my mother-in-law and her mother-in-law, who were both widows. Their husbands were considered as scholars because they could read and write. Although farmers, the father and son had studied about herbs and they used to treat the villagers. But both died when bandits attacked the village, when my husband was an infant.
With my husband gone, my life was the same as if I had not married. I did the same kind of work, but now for my husband's family. I still went to cut firewood, and although I should be considered a woman since I was married, the men treated me as if I was still a girl and helped me as before.
My husband returned from Namyu 4 years later, and he had enough money for us to repair and rebuild our house. We changed the roof from straw to tiles. We had good gravestones made for his father's and grandfather's graves. My work was still the same, for my husband did not like to do farm work anymore. He was teaching himself about herbs, studying the books his father and his grandfather had left him.
Our first son was born when I was 18. We named him Namyu because it was Namyu that helped our lives to become better. But before he could even walk and talk properly, we had to leave our village.
It was a time where bandits roamed the countryside, sacking villages and destroying what they could not carry off with them. 3 times that year, we ran off to hide in the mountains and returned later to build our homes.
Not only that, some men from our village went to the next village and caused trouble. They stripped the clothes of a young, pretty widow and carried her naked in a pig's cage. Our elders released the women and went with gifts to her village to apologize. But the insult was too great for her people. Their men attacked us, and later our men attacked them. Arms and legs were cut off. Entrails, blood, and brains were spilled. Both sides lost men for nothing.
My husband then decided to go to Namyu, where he said there was law and order. At that time, we were hiding from the bandits for the 4th time, and we had nothing left but some Namyu money, the clothes we were wearing, and one cooking pot.
My husband's grandmother was ill and could not travel. So my mother-in-law went to stay with her at a relative's house. Not long after we got to Namyu, the relative sent us a letter to tell us that the old women had died one after the other and asked us to send him money for the burials that he had done on our behalf.
The seas were choppy, and sometimes waves came over and drenched us. The sun beat us, the night winds were cold, rain soaked us. The sailors gave us meat cooked with salt, but I was ill and could not eat. Day and night, the ship rocked. I leaned against the side of the ship, vomiting into the sea. I thought I was sure to die, far away from my mother, who must be weeping for me.
We arrived in Malacca, and they had to carry me off the ship. My husband's uncle took us in, and we lived in his storeroom. It was agreed that uncle and nephew, who worked together as they had in the past, with my husband helping him to sell charcoal. But for some reason, they quarreled one day, and very bitterly. My husband was a gentleman, and to this day, I cannot understand how he could have quarreled with his uncle.
My husband took my son and me away to Singapore. This time, we traveled in a smaller boat, and the sea was kinder. We rented a room in a shop house, and he went to work for a gunny set collector.
At first, I did not dare to come out of the house. Everything was so strange, bright and hot, and so noisy, even the sound that people make when you were talking. My husband said they were Singapore like us, but from other parts of China. So I could not understand what they were saying. But I was so happy when he brought a man and his wife to come and visit us one day. And they were from our province. For the first time, I could talk to another woman. And I cried as we spoke. I told her I wanted to go back. I cannot bear to live in this new place. She was older than me and had been Namyu longer.
Daniel, she said, do you want to live or die? If you want to die, make it quick. It's so easy. Hang yourself or jump into the river. I want to die, but I dare not. Who will take care of my son and husband? Then what must you do?
The next day, I asked my husband for some money and came off the house to buy some vegetables. I learned to talk to the other tenants living on the shop houses and to the other people living on our street. My son played with the other children in the back lane, and I came to know their mothers.
Over the next 10 years, we had 6 more sons and finally a daughter. I have always liked the lotus, which is the Kuang Yin's flower, and so I asked my husband to name her Alian, but he named her Bilian, although to me, beauty had no value and was the last thing I wanted for my daughter.
My husband started his own gunny sack business and went bankrupt 3 times. He was the guarantor to people he called friends, who borrowed money and then ran back to China. Our household things were taken away, and we ended up with debts, which we had to struggle to pay off. Just when we had cleared one batch of debts, he would get into trouble again for nothing. Though my mouth could not say so, in my heart, I called him a useless man each time my children did not have enough rice to eat.